Thanks for having us here today. We're very pleased to have been partnering with Newsworks on what we think is quite an innovative research programme, the core aim of which has been to ascertain the value of newsbrands and unearth new learning and insight for the media and comms planning and buying communities. I've worked in marketing research for 20 years, the first 5 of which were spent in insight roles at media agencies in the very pre-digital, or at least nascent digital era, where reach and frequency and the ultimate cost efficiency balance thereof was of paramount importance in evaluating the success of campaigns. But in the 20 years or so since then, questions about what constitutes brand and campaign success have become much more considered, more complicated, and much more demanding from a demonstrating ROI perspective. And that's despite more daily metrics and more real-time campaign data being available, as well as the increasing ability to measure actual versus claimed behaviours with greater accuracy. Really unpicking the relative value, importance and contribution of different media and commerce vehicle has become much harder in that context, and not least because media channels themselves have evolved. TV, we know, is not just the box in the room, video content is everywhere, on and offline. Out of home has become more digital than traditional inventory these days, and newspapers, of course, have long since moved beyond just being about physical copies. Newsbrands are now both on and offline. They are always on vehicles for brands and advertisers to communicate with different audiences depending on the end goal. It's all in that context why Newsworks came to us with a twofold challenge. We were tasked with exploring the extent to which, in this very complicated and always-on media landscape, can newspaper or can newsbrand advertising strengthen an ad campaign? What is its value, utility and contribution, etc., as part of a wider comms plan? And secondly, as a logical extension of the first challenge, we were asked to explore how newsbrands encourage people to change their behaviours. So going beyond hygiene factors such as heightened brand, ad or campaign awareness and uplifts on campaign KPIs, etc. What really is the call to action from newsbrands? What do people do differently as a result of newsbrand advertising? How do they behave differently? So 2 core requirements to the overall study. So how do we go about setting out to answer those 2 questions? Well, firstly, no surprises. We needed some campaigns to evaluate and consumers, in other words, potential campaign recipients or respondents to talk to. So as part of that, we undertook a quantitative online survey with a nationally representative sample of participants from across the UK. We surveyed just under 1,700 people and ran our studies between April and June of this year. Approximately 400 research participants rated each campaign we tested, so robust enough samples for the individual campaign measures we were interested in. Sample was nationally representative based on the usual seg, demographic breakdown, age, gender, region, and data weighted accordingly. And in most cases, and obviously for the purposes of today's presentation, we have aggregated results, so the findings are based on a combination of all the campaigns rather than the individual ones that you see. 8 campaigns have been included so far within our analysis. All are fairly large multi-platform campaigns with a total campaign spend of approximately £500,000. And all campaigns must have featured a significant element of newsbrand advertising across national titles. 20 to 50% of campaign spend must have been on newsbrands. This includes print edition as well as through the Newsbrand website. We've explored a good mix of brands and advertiser categories, and at this stage I should say that this really isn't the end of the study. We're kind of halfway through. We are looking for another 10 campaigns to test as part of our ongoing and interactive exploration. So if you do have campaigns that roughly fulfil the criteria, £500,000-ish of spend, 20 to 50% across national titles, then please do speak to the team at Newsworks. We'd be very happy to include you in the second phase of the study, and I believe there's a box outside where you can put in your information if you'd like to be contacted. But we're very much looking for 10 more campaigns to test over the next few months. So before I hand over to Shaun, the head of our media research division, to walk you through the first 3 elements of the main body findings, I thought it worth setting the scene with some of the headlines. This isn't a spoiler alert, just high-level context to outline what we found across the 8 campaigns consistently. So firstly, we found that campaigns involving newsbrands do cut through well, and by that we mean they very much hold their own versus a series of norms and benchmarks we've collected over the past 20 years of conducting advertising and brand effectiveness research. Secondly, we unearthed evidence showing how newsbrands have the biggest potential to drive purchase and loyalty. They can help drive sales and build long-term brand relationships, particularly in terms of preparing people for a call to action and indeed maintaining a behavioural call to action. And that's all been robustly validated as part of our Behaviour Change Model, sometimes known as the trans-theoretical model of behaviour change. Essentially, it's an academically validated psychological model that reveals the influences on behaviour as well as recognising that people will only change behaviour when they're ready to do so. And what we found is that news brands can be used as both a positive nudge and a reinforcement as part of moving people along that decision-making funnel. They can influence people's behaviour and decision-making in a very unique way along the customer journey. Buyer beware, or caveat emptor on headline 3, this study was absolutely not about finding the weaknesses of other media as part of an advertiser campaign. It was about finding the relative strength of news brands as part of an aggregated media mix. So in that context, it will be no surprise to you that TV still dominates and has pretty much since media research began as an industry in terms of being the key channel or vehicle to build that top-line awareness. News brands should not and are not trying to compete with TV in that space, but what they can do well is be persuasive and entice a call to action. The medium and the message are news brand strengths, therefore. They deliver greater salience and intelligibility of message overall, and as per the headline on section 4 there, they can be very persuasive in terms of persuasion metrics, including advertiser fit and call to action, purchase intent, and overall creative enjoyment. Again, many of the themes already alluded to in Becky's presentation. But again, per headline slide, if you put TV and news brands together, they offer a very complementary aspect to advertiser campaigns, including being able to move the dial on awareness, call to action, and brand usage. News brands can also work very well with out of home in driving purchase intent and brand likability. And we've also been able to validate how news brands in combination with TV and other media are very effective additions to the media plan. So TV's reach will build the awareness, but the persuasiveness of news brand advertising will help to drive sales and build longer term relationships. Shaun's going to talk you through the first 3 points.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Adele. Yeah, so as Adele mentioned, I'm just going to show you some of the evidence behind some of these points now. So to start with the point that Adele made, news brand campaigns cut through really well. In order to measure this, we interviewed a nationally representative sample online, as Adele mentioned. And across all of the campaigns that we tested, 33% of people said they saw at least one element of the campaign. And that's broadly in line with our norm. So we've been conducting campaign evaluation projects for almost 20 years now, multi-platform campaigns. And we see kind of these campaigns are very much in line with what we've seen in previous campaigns. But what I thought was quite interesting is when you start looking at the regular readers of the titles that the campaigns were in, actually that rises up to 40%. So even in this kind of fragmented world that we're living in, news brands still have the ability to cut through some of that clutter and be noticed, as a number of the other speakers have already kind of alluded to. But I think, importantly, news brands can do much more than just cut through. As Adele said again at the top, they can really help drive sales and build long-term brand relationships. And so we've got some evidence to show that as well. And I think Adele gave a top-line view of what our behavioural change model is, but that's the analysis, the lens that we looked at this through. So, as Adele mentioned, it's a theoretical model that we've applied to consumer-based research. And effectively what that does is it breaks down any kind of behavioural change or purchase journey into 5 discrete stages. And it acknowledges the fact that it's not a binary decision to change a behaviour or make a purchase. You kind of have to go through these 5 stages in order to change any given behaviour. So the 5 stages that we've got are the pre-contemplation phase, so I'm not currently doing and don't plan to do it in the future. The contemplation stage, which is I'm not currently doing it, but I'm open to doing it in the future. The preparation stage, so I'm starting to think about doing something differently now. And then the action stage is I'm actually going to do something about it. And then the maintenance stage is I've actually done it already, and I'm going to continue doing that. And so that's the model that we've looked at. And then we map where people are on that kind of purchase journey by the different elements of the campaigns that they might have been exposed to. So we've got the green line at the bottom, that's people that didn't notice any elements of the campaigns that we tested. Then we've got the blue line there, which is slightly higher than the green line. That's noticed any element of the campaign but didn't recognise the news brand element of the campaign. And then we've got the gold line as the next one up, which is kind of everyone that recognised at least one element of the campaign. And then the red line is the people that recognise the newsbrand element of the campaign. And what we thought was really interesting, actually, was that the places where the people that recognise the newsbrand campaign over-index the most is at that preparation stage and the maintenance stage. So that indicates to us that's a great news brands are a great place to communicate to people because they're in the process, or at least with the campaigns that we've tested, about making a decision about that product, or they've already made that decision and they are going to do it again. So that's where the kind of loyalty element comes in. So that's where they are on the stage. But if we kind of drill down a bit more in that preparation stage and look at some of the measures that might be appropriate for somebody who's thinking about doing something new or thinking of purchasing something new, knowledge, knowing about what you're going to make a decision on or purchase is an important factor. And you can see here on the left-hand side of the chart, we've got the same kind of coloured bars that I showed on the previous slide. So in the green, didn't recognise any element of the campaign. The blue recognised an element of the campaign but didn't recognise the Newsbrand element. Then we've got the yellow, which is the recognised at least one element of the campaign. And then the Newsbrand element. People who recognise the Newsbrand element are significantly more likely to have knowledge about the brand. And we think that's important because that then translates into purchase intent, which is on the right-hand side of the chart. And again, we see a very similar pattern that people that recognise the Newsbrand element of the campaign are significantly more likely than people who have seen any other element of the campaign to make a purchase. Now, one counter-argument might be, well, that might be because they've got a closer relationship with the brand. So we wanted to kind of test that. And we tried to test that by looking at people who already said that they know little or know a lot about the brand, and then look at their purchase intent. And actually, our hypothesis was still proven to be true. So even amongst people who know something about the brand, they are still more likely to make a purchase for that brand if they've seen the Newsbrand advertising. So we think this is really powerful because these are people that are thinking about making a purchase, and the Newsbrand is speaking to them at that critical time and helping to persuade them to make that purchase. So I've talked about the preparation stage. Those are the top two bars on this chart, the knowledge and the purchase intent. But I wanted to touch on the maintenance stage as well, because these people have already made a purchase and they're going to continue doing it in the future. So we thought the measures that might be important to those people are, if you've made a purchase, you want to tell other people about it, so word of mouth, and you want people to recommend it to other people. And on those two measures as well, we see a significant uplift for people who saw the Newsbrand advertising relative to any other part of the advertising campaign. And likewise on advocacy as well, 16 percentage points higher on advocacy for people that saw the Newsbrand element of the campaign. And it's not just the behavioural metrics that we saw this impact on as well. I think this is quite similar to some of the things that Becky was talking about as well, but it's also helping to drive positive brand image about the brands that we tested as well. So we looked at 5 brand image statements which are consistent across all the campaigns that we tested. First of all, we had is a brand with a good reputation, is a brand I trust, is a brand for people like me, it's a brand I'm hearing more and more good things about, and it's a brand that's part of my everyday life. And consistently, people who've seen the Newsbrand element of the campaign score well on those brand image statements. In fact, double-digit percentage points increase over people that saw another element of the campaign. So again, not only is the Newsbrand advertising helping to kind of generate that behavioural change, but it's also helping to change people's brand perceptions through the advertising campaigns as well. And Adele, she mentioned this at the top as well, but Newsbrands aren't the only answer here. And part of the project, part of the objectives that we're trying to do is understand the role that Newsbrands play in a part of a wider campaign. And so although Newsbrands are really effective at building these long-term brand relationships, like we've just seen, that loyalty, that advocacy, TV still remains a key channel to build brand awareness. So we looked at this by saying, all right, well, every campaign that we tested was a multi-platform campaign. What if you took out the different elements of the campaign? What would happen to your advertising awareness? And unsurprisingly, if you took the TV away from the advertising campaign, you'd see the biggest drop in advertising awareness, so minus 11% in ad awareness if you didn't have TV as part of that campaign. And that was followed by radio, again, minus 4%. Print, again, minus 4%, consistent with radio, and online was minus 4% as well. So obviously, if the campaign objective is to build brand awareness, I think TV does need to be part of that media plan. But as Adele's going to go on and talk about in a minute, that actually the greatest impact can come with combinations of different media. So she's going to talk you through the next couple of points.
Great. So as I alluded to in my opening remarks, persuasion is very much a key strength of Newsbrand advertising, Newsbrands can be really used to drive home some key messages. And in particular, we found that those recognising newsbrand advertising, both the print and the digital editions, were much more likely to take out the key messages our advertisers and therefore the creatives were trying to convey. So by that I mean that when we asked participants to think about the campaign they were shown the creative, and asked to rate how much they agreed or disagreed with statement X, how much the message was conveyed, those recognising the newsbrand element were much more likely or somewhat more likely to agree. In other words, being exposed to the newsbrand element can really enforce things like message takeout, comprehension, understanding, and ultimately clarity of message. And without going into the advertiser-specific detail, some of the example statements included brand X has great offers for new customers, brand X has interesting new products, brand X rewards my loyalty as a customer. So consistent uplift amongst the print and online recognisers versus the total sample for all messages. And reinforcing further what I've just said about the clarity of message delivered, we also were able to corroborate how Newsbrands rate strongest on salience and intelligibility overall. So again, there were a series of statements that were asked across all campaigns and therefore brands, the categories noted on this slide. So when we combined the answers across the 8 campaigns, the Newsbrand elements came out top on 3 core statements. So the adverts told me something new about the brand, 93% agreement across the 8 campaigns. The advert told me something new about the brand, 97% agreement, a huge percentage demonstrating Newsbrands can be used to convey new or different messages. And thirdly, the brand is clearly visible in the advertising. Again, almost full house agreement and testament to the creative industry getting it right and using the Newsbrand vehicles in the right way. And furthermore, the Newsbrand elements in our studies outperformed other media in terms of persuasion diagnostics. So on this slide, you've got the creative diagnostics combined for all the campaigns and percentages. And versus the total samples, you've got the numbers highlighted in blue showing the Newsbrand recognisers were significantly more likely to want to find out more about the brand or that call to action, and were much more likely to think the ads were aimed at people like me. Again, further indicating what we've already talked about, that there's almost an implicit validation that Newsbrands bring to the table. If I read or buy this Newsbrand, it's because I already trust it. The brand must therefore have already vetted the advertising, therefore it must be more credible and for people like me. So there's almost an implicit effect that clearly is inherent in the overall message takeout and comprehensibility. Newsbrand readers were also much more likely to want to buy or try versus the total sample, that's the 70 versus the 84% on the slide, and were much more likely to have enjoyed watching, seeing or hearing the ads, again indicating that the medium and the message does indeed complement itself. And despite some very unique capabilities and abilities delivered by Newsbrands, particularly the brand building element, we still know that TV is the top line awareness dominator. But using our campaign optimizer tool, which is essentially a media mix modelling approach to isolating the individual contribution of each media specific to KPIs. Don't ask me about what's under the bonnet, but really it's a combination of regression analysis and Shapley values. We've got people in the office who can tell you all about that should you wish to know. But we ascertained how Newsbrands work best for driving usage or trial and brand image. So the orange boxes there squared in red on this slide essentially. So again, what you can see is that TV dominates building the brand awareness KPI, but in terms of overall contribution, and given that print and online aspects of the Newsbrands equate to similar levels of contribution overall, it's the 26% on the left there versus the 27%. Newsbrands actually outperform TV based on our 8 campaigns tested for enhancing brand image and driving brand usage, both of which are clearly crucial to driving sales. Now, it's important to note that we haven't yet modelled the ROI impact of each media. We're going to do that once we've completed our 20 campaigns. So this is simply the modelled share of impact of the media KPIs. And I don't want to promise anything, but we might also be able to look more at the profit ROI based on the Sally Dickerson work. So take this a step further once we've got our metadata from all our 20 campaigns. But taking the commentary on the modelled share of impact a step further, we've identified how combining Newsbrands with TV is particularly effective in driving awareness, usage and knowledge. And further using our advanced analytics suite, we were able to identify which KPI levers are best pulled with other levers. So, for example, this shows which driver combinations are most effective with Newsbrands, again, an average across the 8 campaigns tested. So what you can see here essentially is that Newsbrands and out-of-home work well together to drive knowledge, likability and purchase intent. Newsbrands drive word of mouth in conjunction with digital and social, and drive advocacy with magazines. So again, as and when we add more campaigns to the fuller ongoing study, we'll be able to share more detail on how these KPIs are not only complemented in terms of general media effectiveness across KPIs and media channel, but we'd also like to give more of a drill down into advertiser category relationship with Newsbrands and obviously wider media mix efficacy in hierarchies or relative contribution overall. So just to come full circle again and sum up pretty much what we've already said, we know that Newsbrands cut through well and hold their own versus a series of norms and benchmarks we've collected over 20 years. We've unearthed evidence showing how Newsbrands have the biggest potential to drive purchase and loyalty. They can help to drive sales and build long-term brand relationships, particularly in terms of preparing people for a call to action and indeed maintaining a behaviour or indeed positive nudge or reinforcement along a decision-making funnel, the behaviour change model essentially. We've also learned how Newsbrands should try not to compete with TV in the big brand awareness building space, but what Newsbrands can do very well is be persuasive and entice a call to action. And it is true still that the medium and the message are Newsbrand's strengths. Therefore, they deliver greater salience and intelligibility of message, excel at being persuasive, and can really entice that call to action and creative enjoyment. We've learned that if you put TV and Newsbrands together, they offer very complementary aspects to advertiser campaigns. The same goes for Newsbrand's relationship with other media. So all in all, we hope we've given you a very headline view on how and when Newsbrands, in combination with other media, are a very effective addition to the media plan. I think it's somewhat uniquely the persuasiveness of Newsbrand advertising that will help drive sales and build longer-term relationships. So, as I said at the start, we really are looking for some more campaigns to add to this data bank of knowledge over coming months. So please do speak to the team at Newsworks if you would like to be included. We'd be very happy to do so. Thank you very much.